All right, ladies and gentlemen, MrSotko here. Welcome back to the channel. And today I got something pretty fun for you guys. So it is the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto's 1 million Bitcoin stash that nobody really knows where it's at, and nobody knows where that 1 million Bitcoin is. So today I am hunting that 1 million. And I'm going to be talking about it a little bit and showing you guys some interesting information. So another big mystery of Bitcoin was who created Bitcoin itself. And so there's a few identities of possible people, and if I'm on Wikipedia here, which is absolutely not the best source of information, but either way, it's in a lot of documentaries and things like that. So one of them is Nick Szabo. I don't even know if I pronounced that correctly, but either way, so Szabo was one of the very first people to really talk about a cryptocurrency and put it into really exact details. So in 1995, he created a sort of a letter, a manifesto, if you will, of how a cryptocurrency could work. And it was in my last video. So if you guys want to check that out, you can check it out. And it basically talked about public keys, private keys, and how a cryptocurrency would work. Basically describing everything that is Bitcoin, but 14 years before Bitcoin actually came out. Then there's Dorian Nakamoto, who has the last name of Nakamoto and lived not that far away from a guy named Hal Finney, who was the very first receiver of Bitcoin. Unfortunately, Hal Finney has since passed, so nobody can really question him much more. And then there's Craig Stephen Wright, who self-claimed to be the creator of Bitcoin, but a lot of people doubt it, and there was a lot of evidence to the contrary. And then further in the Wikipedia here is other possibilities naming various other people. However, that's not what I'm going to focus on today. What I'm going to focus on is Satoshi's 1 million Bitcoin. So 1 million Bitcoin, you can imagine, would be worth a lot of money. So there's basically 1 million Bitcoin floating around there that never got actually sent around and has been dormant in various addresses that supposedly belong to Satoshi Nakamoto, that were originally made when Bitcoin first came out. Within the first few days and first few months, Satoshi was mining a lot of Bitcoin on his own behalf and on his own behalf, basically. So back then, the difficulty was extremely low, and the target time was just 10 minutes. So one person could essentially mine tons of Bitcoin. And it was, I think, 50 Bitcoin at the time per block. And so you could get a lot of Bitcoin very, very, very quickly. So we'll go through some articles here. We'll get a little bit deeper as we go, and this should be pretty interesting. So people keep sending Satoshi Nakamoto Bitcoin. So Satoshi Nakamoto is the original hodler, having left the bulk of his coins unmoved since day one. The theoretical wealth of Bitcoin's pseudonymous creator is a hot topic, and that one mainstream media are especially fond of pondering. In recent weeks, Bitcoin's record highs have propelled Satoshi into the billionaire league, making him one of the world's 50 richest people. So there's another reason why Satoshi's digital wealth is growing, however. People keep sending him Bitcoin, and that's not necessarily true. I don't know about that exactly. I would have worded that differently. However, the number of Bitcoins owned by Satoshi Nakamoto is widely regarded as being 1,148,800 based on detailed analysis that was published in 2013. Evidence shows that the bulk of the first 36,000 blocks was mined by one computer, which can only have been Satoshi. At the time, the reward block was 50 Bitcoin, and the 1.8414 million awarded 63% was never spent, leaving Satoshi with a fortune of over 1.1 million Bitcoin. So mind you if I sound a little nasally. I'm just still a little sick. I made a video earlier in the day, and it's only been a few hours, so I'm still there. So today, that would mean Satoshi Nakamoto is worth around $16.8 billion. Add in another $3.4 billion in Bitcoin Cash, $370 million in Bitcoin Gold. Ignore every fork after that, and you wind up with total assets of $20.5 billion. This is all hypothetical, of course, since most people believe that Satoshi's coins will never move for various reasons. Nevertheless, on paper at least, Satoshi Nakamoto's unclaimed billions place him 37th in the world's richest list above Microsoft founder Paul Allen and just $5 billion behind George Soros. So the only Satoshi to officially make Forbes' billionaires list, incidentally, is cosmetics titan Satoshi Suzuki, with a fortune of just $1.3 billion. However, he ranks a distant 1,567th if or when Bitcoin hits 60,000. Satoshi will become the world's richest man, overtaking Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, who have 75.6 and 86 billion respectively. So Satoshis for Satoshis. If Satoshi Nakamoto is one guy, and he is still alive, it's safe to assume that he has no desire to touch his cryptocurrency stash. Based on what little is known of Bitcoin's creator, it's hard to imagine him developing a sudden urge for the high life. Whatever Satoshi's aspirations, becoming a billionaire playboy is not one. Given that Satoshi Nakamoto owns more Bitcoin than anyone else in the world, the last thing he needs is more Bitcoin. But that's exactly what's been happening every week for the past 8 years. Not only the value of Satoshi's holdings have been increasing, but so is their number. So here's an address. Here is a Bitcoin address, and I will show you this in just a moment. So this Bitcoin address is the address associated with the Genesis block. It was here that the first 50 Bitcoins ever issued were sent on the 3rd January 2009. The transaction is marked as no inputs. The 50 Bitcoin this address contains, like that in most of the addresses attributed to Satoshi, have never been moved. As a consequence, one would expect its balance today to read 50. In actual fact, Bitcoin's Genesis address actually contains 66.7 Bitcoin sent over the course of 1,140 transactions. So let me show you this. Believe this is it here. We can actually maybe just click on this address and go right to it. Yeah, indeed. So that was it already. So you can see here, 66.77 and some odd Bitcoin. So this is block 0. This is the very first block. It, in fact, took him about 10 days, if I recall correctly, to mine Bitcoin to this address. So nobody knows why it took 10 days, because it should only take 10 minutes, approximately 10 minutes, as that's the targeted time for a Bitcoin block to be found. So it should just have 50 in it, because that's what the transaction was. That's what the block reward was at the time when Bitcoin came out. And then every 4 years it halves. So it went down to 25 and then 12.5 and so on and so on. So if we look here, we can see these little tiny bits of Bitcoin. So just these little micro amounts of Bitcoin being sent. So this is essentially a wishing well, if you will. If you send, nothing can actually ever send. So this block 0 is where all addresses sort of come to. If you just trace it all back, you'll come to this one. But this address is in fact broken, and you cannot take Bitcoin from this address, but you can send Bitcoin to the address. So nobody really knows why. Maybe Satoshi messed up on this one, but it really sort of starts at block 1, where is an actual functional block, but block 0 is the Genesis address. So people keep sending coin to that. So we want to read about the Genesis block here. We'll read about that. You'll get a better idea. So the Genesis block is the first ever block of Bitcoin mined by creator Satoshi Nakamoto. The original block has 50 Bitcoins in it, and it was mined over the course of 6 days. So it was 6 days. So the 50 Bitcoin within the blocks are unspendable. However, it's a subject of much debate whether this was an intentional fluke on Nakamoto's part, also known as block 0. So when Satoshi Nakamoto began mining the Genesis block on January 3rd, it's possible that he or she or a group of people had any clue about the chain of events it would set off. The Genesis block, also known as block 0, is the ancestor that every other block in the chain can trace its lineage back to. It was mined over the course of 6 days by Nakamoto, which is puzzling to Bitcoin fans, as the average timestamp gap between mining blocks is normally just 10 minutes. So why did this first block take so long? The most logical explanation is that Nakamoto was testing his creation to make sure the original block was perfect. It had to be, since it would be hardwired into the system forever. So perhaps the most mystifying aspect of the Genesis block is a secret message that Nakamoto imbued within the block's raw data. It says the Times, 3rd January 2009, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout for banks. So if you were around back in 2008, 2009, which I imagine most of you were, there was a lot of bank bailouts during that time. It was a very bad economic crisis. So while Nakamoto had never commented on the meaning of his message, it's not hard to infer that it serves as a mission statement for Bitcoin itself. The text comes from a headline in the January 3rd, 2009 edition of The Times, a London-based newspaper. So the article reported on the British government's failing to stimulate the economy following 2008 financial crisis. Another thing I just want to comment on real quick is that if you go back to this Wikipedia article here talking about the other possibilities, and it talks about who he could have been. If you actually read this, in a lot of the messages sent back and forth by Satoshi Nakamoto and other people, there is a lot of British speak, sort of British English, if you will. So like bloody hard and the word bloody and such like that. So some of the other people that are speculated are British or Finnish, or just European in general. So all the other people that are mentioned here, like Craig Wright, as Hal Finney, Dorian Nakamoto, or they're all American, to my knowledge, pretty American anyway. And so it is theorized that if none of these people are correct, then it may be somebody in England that had created it, just because of the way that they talk in the letters. Because, if I send a letter to somebody, like, I'm not going to use the word bloody or this, that, or the other thing that normally an Englishman would say, just because I don't use that on a daily basis. So, interesting that he's commenting on a British government's failing to stimulate the economy rather than the American government failing to stimulate the economy during the 2008 crisis, because there were bailouts in America as well. So Nakamoto famously hated the idea of too big to fail institutions and intended Bitcoin to be different. Bitcoin couldn't be bailed out because there was no corporation or middleman between the currency and the consumer. So looking at all this, it seems pretty likely that Nakamoto's reference to the article was a hint as to why he chose the moment for Bitcoin to be born. Interestingly, the 50 Bitcoin reward contained within the Genesis block is unable to be spent due to a minor change in the code. So it's unknown whether this was intentional or unintentional on Nakamoto's part. People have been donating small amounts of Bitcoin in tribute to Nakamoto, transferring funds to this original block. So it seems like kind of a sacrifice, since once a coin is moved into the Genesis block, it cannot be moved. Sort of like throwing a quarter into a fountain. So why people donate to it, I suppose as a tribute, as just a message, as a spiritual thing, who knows, really. The Genesis block is the backbone of the entire Bitcoin system and the origin of Bitcoin itself. If every transaction with Bitcoin was like a fork in the road, then all the roads would lead back to the Genesis block. So there is that. Here's another article. Bitcoin's mysterious creator appears to be sitting on 5.8 billion in fortune. So you will see this number vary from time to time in these articles, and that's because this article was October 31st, 2017, when the price of Bitcoin was at this, and if you find an earlier one or an older one, it depends, and it'll say, a lot of billions or a little bit of billions, depending. But either way, the Bitcoin that is this supposedly being held by Satoshi Nakamoto's addresses does vary as well. Some people I've heard anywhere from 850,000 to 1.3 million. Earlier we were reading an article that had 1.1 some odd million in it, so it does vary quite a bit. It's been a very good year for Bitcoin, while the cryptocurrency climbing more than 600% to over 6,000. As a result, one of Bitcoin's largest holders appears to be now worth nearly $6 billion. So in 2013, Bitcoin watcher and head of cryptocurrency firm Sergio Lemur wrote a series of blog posts explaining why he believes an account holding 980,000 individual Bitcoins belongs to Bitcoin's mysterious founder, Satoshi Nakamoto. So Lerner analyzed the path of the first Bitcoins ever created or mined and traced them to a single mining source. Is that Lerner or Lemmer? That is Lemmer. So then correlated this source to about 19,600 other Bitcoin blocks, which were actually just sets of cryptographic puzzles that, when solved, were worth 50 Bitcoins in 2010. So this mining entity stopped at 19,600 and never moved any of the Bitcoins it had earned. So Lemmer believed anyone who wasn't Satoshi would have almost certainly tried to sell at least some of the Bitcoins to take profits on what turned out to be as successful as speculative investment. The fact that none of the Bitcoins have been touched suggests that the miner has shown complete trust in Bitcoin and is almost certainly therefore Satoshi. So Nolan, a researcher at Bitcoin News and researcher group CoinDesk, says that Lemmer's analysis is generally accepted as accurate within the Bitcoin community. The leading analysis remains that Sergio published 3 to 4 years ago. There has not been much done besides this, but that analysis managed to turn into something people quote as the truth. In an email, Lemmer told Money that since he published his original post, nothing has changed about the supposed Satoshi holdings, and that no additional coin has been spent, and no research has revealed anything else about them. So hence, the alleged Satoshi stash contains 980,000 Bitcoins, which at the current price is 5.8 billion. So again, we've heard 980,000, we've heard 1.1 million. We've heard that it was 1.8 million at one point, and then some of them were moved. So there is a lot about this and what's going on. Like nobody quite knows and can't quite figure it out because of Bitcoin's anonymity and because it's so hard to trace back so many years ago. So Quartz reported Nakamoto's wealth would make him the 247th richest. So who is Satoshi Nakamoto? There have been multiple claims to his identity. In 2014, Newsweek fingered a Californian man named Dorian Satoshi Nakamoto, who vigorously denied the report. And then in 2016, an Australian named Craig White claimed he had invented the cryptocurrency. Okay, so Craig White was Australian. But other observers pointed out inconsistencies in the evidence, right used, and other elements about Satoshi's backstory, leading the many to conclude it wasn't him. So there's still no agreement. But somebody is sitting on $6 billion in crypto. So another article here basically asks the question, what if Satoshi Nakamoto sold all of his Bitcoin? So if he has 1 million, and Bitcoin has a finite supply of 21 million, so expected to reach by the year 2140, that would be 5% of all of the Bitcoins, 21 million at approximately 5%. So the idea that if 1 million Bitcoins were sold, it would flood the market for one, and then it would also crash the market as well. So the thing is about Bitcoin, if you control 1 million of them, you have the ability to flood the market at any point. Think of them as rare baseball cards. They're valuable because they're rare. If somebody could dump hundreds or thousands of Mickey Mantle trading cards, rare ones, onto the market, they wouldn't be worth so much anymore. So Nakamoto has really gone undercover since he decided to pull away from his creation, and for a man with such high value, his influence has not been noted among the pseudo-anonymous Bitcoin network. So it just goes to show, that with all that Bitcoin, if it was to be sold, I'm sure everybody would love to get their hands on it, but the problem is it would definitely lower the price of Bitcoin. If 1 million got flooded onto the market, that's more than we've ever seen, period. As technically there's only, 16, 17 million currently, so that's definitely more than 5% of what is currently out now. That's only about 5% of what the total could be. So here we go. Here's an interesting article. It's called 9 Infamous Bitcoin Addresses. So the first address here is the Genesis address, and we already showed you that. We'll click on that again. It shows 66.77 in there. And it's only, so it's gained 16.77 by these, coins in the well, these spiritual wishes, if you will, to dump Bitcoin into it. And they're always not a lot. It's just okay, so it even says it there, $2.01 in Bitcoin. This one is $7.13, and so on, $9. And I'm not sure if that's the price at the time or if that's the price now. $81.06. So people are really dumping a lot of Bitcoin into this. For what reason? I couldn't tell you. So, but this is an interesting article. It kind of goes a little bit off topic here, but it is still fun to check it out. So here's another one. The U.S. Marshals, the destination of the Bitcoins nabbed from the Ross Ulbricht and the Silk Road investigation, then auctioned off. Before the auctions of this and other U.S. Marshal-controlled Bitcoins, the federal government was considered to be the largest holders of Bitcoin, aside from the addresses controlled by Satoshi Nakamoto. So total received 29,000 Bitcoin. Here's Laszlo's Pizza Exchange. And this is used to make what is considered the first purchase made with Bitcoin in May of 2010. Laszlo exchanged 10,000 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas, a purchase he shared on a Bitcoin forum. This was a significant moment in Bitcoin history as it bridged the gap between the digital and physical worlds, marked a turning point in which Bitcoin could be exchanged for real-world goods. So 10,000 Bitcoin for 2 pizzas, and These are the actual pieces of pizza, apparently, that were bought with 10,000 Bitcoin. So French-made, aka DEA Carl M. Force, one of the DEA agents investing in the Silk Road, used an unauthorized handle named French-made to extort Bitcoin from Silk Road, found Ross Ulbricht into this address, and then eventually disappeared, or eventually into a personal account. So Blockhead Force was eventually caught and indicted. So this was basically a corrupt DEA agent that transferred a whole bunch of Bitcoin into his own address. So very, very interesting there. The largest transaction ever. The recipient of one of 500,000 Bitcoin transfer, considered the largest in history, worth over $100 million by prices as of April 2015. So there's not a lot about that. It just basically shows 500,000 Bitcoin being moved. This is another address here. Bloomberg reporter gets his Bitcoin pinched on TV. This made national news when Bloomberg's TV, Matt Miller, flashed the QR code and private key of his Bitcoin address to the camera. A keen Redditor, Milky Way Masta, took a freeze of the image, scanned the QR code, and extracted the funds to his own address. He then posted the details of his maneuver on Reddit and offered to return the Bitcoin if Miller gave him a new address, which he did. This was an important event as it showed the importance of keeping a private key secure and the ignorance of this by the general public. The ease at which Bitcoin can be swiped, and perhaps the most inspiring, the goodwill of a member of the Bitcoin community for taking the Bitcoin and returning it to showcase all of these points. So it was only a little bit of Bitcoin and wasn't quite a lot there. WikiLeaks donation of 3,889. We got Bitstamp was hacked for 19,000 Bitcoin. And one very rich identity. So this is one of 9 accounts, all containing approximately 66,000 Bitcoin and linked by a single transaction that implies one owner is in possession of 550,000 Bitcoin. So total received a whole bunch. That's just one, and so a transaction links 9 accounts. So very interesting. So now we're going to kind of get into it a little bit here, a little bit more. And this is one of the last articles I have. And the well-deserved fortune of Satoshi Nakamoto, Bitcoin creator, visionary, and genius. So I won't discuss anything in this post. I'm tired of discussing technical things with people with skewed opinions and monetary interests. I've talked enough in the Bitcoin forum about Satoshi. Some people screamed at me, but a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I will show pictures that everyone can replicate. Please forgive me for the awful image design. The graphs were made by a new blockchain analysis technique I tested that consists on tracking the extra nonce fields in the Coinbase field of the Coinbase transaction, which is one that creates Bitcoins. As far as I know, it hasn't been done before. It hasn't been done before. In the following graphs, each dot is the creation of 50 Bitcoin. I have only analyzed and printed graphs from block 0 up to block 36,000. So I wonder what will I get when I process the remaining 3. So terribly written, but you'll see where this is going. So the extra nonce fields increments every time the nonce fields, which is 32 bits, overflows. So it's a slow real-time clock until the application is restarted, in which case it goes back to 1. Note the x-axis in the graphs is not time. It's the block number. I don't think there is a moral obligation to not publish this information since it's already public domain. Also, Satoshi was completely aware of the poor anonymization capabilities of Bitcoin. Nevertheless, this loss of privacy could have been absent if random extra nonces had been used instead of incremental ones. So I could be thought as a Bitcoin privacy vulnerability for the miners. Wow, the English. Disclaimer, I can't assure with 100% certainty that all the black dots are owned by Satoshi, but almost all are owned by a single entity, and that entity began mining right from block 1. And with the same performance as the Genesis block, it can be identified by constant slope segments that occasionally restart. Also, this entity, the only entity that has been shown to complete trust in Bitcoin since it hasn't spent any coins, as last as the eye could see. I estimate at eyesight that Satoshi fortune is around 1 million Bitcoins, or $100 million US at current exchange rate, which was probably, I think this was made a while ago. Let's see if there's a date on here. 2013. So yeah, indeed. So that must have been a while ago, 100 million. So I'm sure there will be plenty of people that will carefully analyze the source data and come up with the exact figure. So the vertical lines on the graph were added by me to show when the mining application is restarted approximately every 100 hours, probably to back up the wallet. So if you see here, this is like every 50 dots, and it appears that these all restart at a pretty regular basis. And so he thinks all of these are, and this is not time, but rather the blockchain itself. So this is probably block 1 somewhere back here. And you can see 50 Bitcoin, and these are all 50 dots. And so every so often, approximately, he would restart his miner in some way, shape, or form, and probably back up his wallet. So you can see all these coins are likely Satoshi, and after a while, he was mining less and less and less. So pretty much all the coins mined initially were likely Satoshi for the first days or weeks, and then after months go by, his mining would have significantly fallen off as more people begin to mine. So one of the consequences of these graphs is that the real name of the sender of a single transaction belonging to the entity is identified, then Satoshi mystery identity will be revealed. I bet that this will happen in the days following this post. These are all tools. Apparently, it did not happen. These are all the tools and assumptions I made. I used a file bootstrap. I assume the bootstrap contains only the best chain. I only take into account Coinbase transactions. I've assumed that if a Coinbase output is spent, then none of these spent coins went back to Satoshi. Note that 1,814,000 Bitcoin awarded, and then 1,148,000 have never been spent, 63%. So I suppose, but not have checked yet, that these are exactly the segments that belong to the mystery identity. If somebody wants to check these computations, is welcome, but I've used a special blockchain parser made with myself with a little bit of testing. So, pretty good detective work on the part of this guy here, and that's just that's the Sergio Lerner. So maybe it was Lerner. I don't know. Either way, so this is the guy that essentially did that, and kind of found that all of these blocks were likely Satoshi. All of these blocks mining immediately upon the creation of Bitcoin. So who else could have been mining these when Bitcoin just came out? And it didn't really hit mainstream, not even remotely mainstream, for at least several weeks before a lot of people started to find these on forums and things like that, and how to even do it and set it up. So it looks like Satoshi mined for quite some time, and eventually, for maybe it looks like just about half a year that these were Satoshi himself, and then it looks like Satoshi fell off there, and then more people jumped on the bandwagon there. So hi Bitcoiners, I heard that Satoshi Nakamoto has more than 1 million Bitcoins. I became really curious to see the wallet with all those Bitcoins. So I did some research, and I couldn't find any info on which are the wallet addresses that hold such coins. In fact, I found that most of the coins held in a wallet right now is about 300K, held by the FBI or something. So I'd like to ask the community where the address that holds such amount of Bitcoins, and what info we've got about what Satoshi did with his coins, and did he sell them? Does he still have them? Where are they? So most people typically agree that it's spread out amongst many thousands of addresses. Pretty much the first 144 blocks on day one of Bitcoin, 95% sure the majority of coins are Satoshis. Yes, each block, different addresses of about 50 Bitcoin each. Each 144 block each day adds up to thousands of addresses. So in the first couple weeks, it'd say that 90% are Satoshis. The first month was 40% Satoshis. The first couple months, probably 20%. And by the end of the year, 5% are Satoshis, but all of those addresses, thousands of addresses, have 50 Bitcoin on them each. So somebody linked blockchain 1 and blockchain 2, rather block 1 and block 2. And so if you click on the hash, I believe, of these, you can eventually find the address that it went to. And then this is the second block. So there's the Genesis block. That's block 0. This is block 1, and then this is block 2. And you can see that these did go to different addresses. So we have 12C6, and then we have 1HL0D, or OD. So you can see that these did start to go to different addresses. I highly doubt And you can see that these are very close to each other. This block was 2 minutes, 2:54. This was 2:55. So these blocks were very, very close to each other. So these are the very first two blocks when difficulty essentially didn't exist. You know, the block time was supposed to be 10 minutes, but I would imagine in the first couple blocks that the difficulty has not adjusted yet to make sure that it is 10 minutes. I can't really be sure of that, but I would imagine that that is the way. So I think that pretty much solves it. Not that I did amazing detective work there, but I think it's pretty much that there is no one address. If there was, people would definitely know about it. They would have definitely found it in the blockchain by now, because you can go through these blocks, these heights, and individually search for you know, where these coins went and what addresses these have on them. And so even this address just has 50 coins. That's it. This address just has 50 coins. So it goes to show that maybe actually somebody sent some coin to this address, because there's a little bit more there, and there wasn't any really fees at that point. So I'm not sure how it received a little bit more. I think people are actually sending to these addresses. But those are definitely Satoshis, or whoever created Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto now is just essentially a pseudonym for whoever created Bitcoin. So the first block and the second block here, and probably many after that, were just sent to individually different addresses. Why that's the case, I'm not really sure. And it looks like all these were sent to a ton of different addresses and then backed up as they went. So Satoshi's mysterious gold fortune out in the hills, you know, it's kind of like the Dutchman's, the lost Dutchman's mine. I actually live about 20 miles or so, maybe 30, I don't know, from Superstition Mountain, where the lost Dutchman's gold mine is supposedly hidden. So it's supposedly hidden somewhere in there. It's supposedly near Weaver's Needle, which is a big mountainous structure that sticks up like a needle. That's a little bit further deeper into the Superstition Mountains. You can actually see it on Google Earth if you just kind of zoom in a little bit. It's supposedly somewhere around there, a lost gold mine that everybody's been looking for. So everybody's looking for Satoshi's lost gold, lost Bitcoin, millions of Bitcoin. And I think we found them, but I think it's a little... In the end, it's a little disappointing maybe that it's not all in one wallet, like a million coins just sitting all in one wallet. I don't know why he would do that anyway. No intelligent person would probably keep them all in one wallet, but I think that's what everybody's expecting, is to come across one big wallet and be like, wow, you know, I wonder how I could get my hands on that million Bitcoin. But it's not going to happen. I doubt it's ever going to happen. None of these coins have ever moved. There was 50 coins, 50 coins, 50 coins, and none of them have ever moved, except for a little bit, supposedly 66% somewhere at some point. Or like rather 44% have moved, and then 66% all remain in the hands of Satoshi somewhere. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was a little fun for you guys. And as usual, I will see you guys next time.